Welcome to episode 5 of Meet Me at Brunch. Today is one of our marketing deep dive chats, and we'll be talking about everything to do with social media and what actually works for wineries. I am Kate Burley, CMO here at Brunch Agency, and joining me today are two of our marketing legends.
Hello, I'm Maddy. I'm the head of marketing here at Brunch.
And I'm Amber. I'm a senior account manager here at Brunch.
And if you're familiar with the podcast by now, you'll know that we kick things off with our mystery wine tasting. So these ladies will be tasting a wine throughout the episode, trying to guess what it is, and then we'll wrap up at the end with a big reveal. If you've also listened to episode 3, you'll know that I'm based in our New Zealand office, and so sadly I won't get to taste the wine today, but our producer has let me know what it is, so I can play along on the sidelines.
All right, I'm going to pour something. I can tell it's a white wine. I can tell it's a white wine.
Even.
I won't give away any clues by saying that is true.
Let's have a little go and see what we're dealing with here.
It is a little cold.
It is cold. I can feel it through the glass. It's freezing cold.
It'll change once it warms
It certainly
up.
will. And it's smelling like a Chardonnay to me straight off the bat, which I'm 2 for 2 because my first podcast was also a Chardonnay.
And I'm jealous because Chardonnay is my go-to wine. I'm an old lady. Chardonnay and gin and tonics. I'm
exactly the same. There's a lot of oak coming out of that at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as that warms up as the episode goes along. But for me, definitely smelling like an oaked Chardonnay at this point.
It kind of smells smoky.
Yeah, it's got a real smokiness to it.
We'll keep checking in on you guys. And I said I'm very jealous if it is a Chardonnay. Not going to give that away, but we'll see. So in this episode, we're going to explore how wineries can make social media a more powerful part of their marketing toolkit and building deep connections with their audience, growing brand awareness, and turning engagement into meaningful results. We'll cover smart content ideas, platform tips, some of the common mistakes to avoid, and then ways to help you use social media more strategically and effectively as a winery. So ladies, while we're thinking about social media, what's some of the biggest misconception wineries have?
One of the biggest misconceptions that wineries have about social media is actually what to use it for. A lot of wineries make the mistake of trying really hard to make sales conversions through organic social media. The most effective results that we see with organic social media is actually about connecting your audience and strengthening brand connections and sort of building that emotional connection between a consumer and the brand. Organic social media has got a lot more power when it's used in a way that connects the audience to the brand.
I agree. And I think kind of leading into that, another big misconception is that they need to focus on followers, but it kind of goes into what you're saying. You should really be looking at engagement, and just doing sort of sale offers or sale posts is not going to drive engagement for your brand. You need to be doing a lot more things, content focused, building this brand story, which is going to help with engagement.
It's really different these days. There's less owners to follow and a lot more around liking and or commenting and sharing content.
Yeah. That engagement is really something we'll talk about a lot today.
Yeah, and that's really the better metric to be measuring on, as opposed to how many followers you have per se. There's lots of ways that you can have people engaging with your content that aren't even following your brand specifically. And I tend to find that following often comes after someone's been engaging with the brand for some time, as opposed to, oh, this looks like a cool brand, I'll follow it, which is what it used to be.
And why do we see some wineries struggle to see results from their organic social media efforts?
I think a lot of it comes down to inconsistency. When you're building your brand on social, you need to show up and you need to be consistent so that your followers or the people that are engaging with your brand know what they're expecting or know what they're getting from you. A lot of wineries, they'll start posting and get really into it, and then they'll let it.
Yeah, it's hard work, isn't it? Because
it is.
It's so much content that has to be generated for social media, and
absolutely.
It can feel a bit exhausting sometimes, like trying to sort of keep it fresh and relevant. And I think wineries can easily fall into the trap of just, they're busy, someone in the business is doing the social media alongside doing a bunch of other stuff, and so it's quite easy to just start posting static posts. It will quickly lose meaning for people if it's not being posted with intent, which in reality takes time. I think that's one of the big issues for wineries, is they underestimate how much time it takes to do social media well. You can
Totally
do
agree.
social media quickly, but whether or not it's good,
That's a different story.
that's a different story.
You have one end where you're not posting really at all or very infrequently. There's no understanding. It's just a bit haphazard. There's the other side of those who are trying and really trying to give it a go, which is fantastic. But there, again, there's no thought process. It's just throwing out content for whoever's available at that time. So it's trying to find that happy medium of content that has purpose and makes sense and also is authentic to the brand and that winery themselves as well.
Meta will know that anyway. They're going to favor brands that are, one, posting consistently, and two, brands that are posting meaningful content that clearly is driving engagement. That's what Meta wants at the end of the day.
Yeah, they want people to be staying on their
Exactly.
platforms. And so the better the content, the more engagement you have, the more that you're prioritized in their algorithm.
Yeah.
What's one easy social media win that wineries aren't taking advantage of?
The biggest thing that I see is lack of planning. A lot of wineries, the person who's doing the social media is often stretched quite thin. You need to have a really strong plan in place. But even if you're working with an agency, it still needs to be content that is generated at the venue or at the winery level or at the cellar door or things like that, which means it has to be a collaboration between someone inside the winery business and the agency for that partnership to be really strong and to make fantastic content. Having a plan is really key to that you've got consistent messaging that's planned out ideally, more than a month in advance, and that fits in with what the brand is about.
Having content pillars is a good way to set yourself up for success. We know a lot of the times it is a person who's doing multiple jobs. It's not just social media that they're doing at the winery. If you're looking at it as this big beast that you don't know how to tackle, content pillars are a good way to help you plan that out and think about what you actually want to post or what you should be posting.
And making sure that those posts are aligning to what the brand is actually about as well. And it helps to keep your tone of voice on point. It helps to keep your messaging on point, so that you're giving someone a really authentic brand experience for them to engage with on social media. And I think just taking that step back, developing some content pillars, making a bit more of a plan, that's definitely the first place I'd start.
Having that plan means you're going to have the content. You need to be able to have the images or the videos or the short clips to then post consistently and authentically. Having that plan, you then know, okay, we know pre-harvest we want to go out and get these assets ready, or any key stages during the winemaking process as well.
I think with the content pillars as well, it's a good way for you to make sure that you're doing loads of different types of content. You're not always going out with very wine specific content or just harvest specific content. If you have your content pillars and your content plan, you can look out what's mapped out for the rest of the month and be like, actually, I've got a lot of wine heavy focus posts. Maybe I should throw in some.
So you can have more diversity.
Behind the scenes or a person.
Yeah, I definitely think that the content pillars and having a solid plan is the key to success for wineries. All right, we're going to have a little look at this wine now, see if it's still very cold. Still a lot of oak coming through on that.
So we're still Chardonnay. I'm
Still
jealous.
Chardonnay. No, I'm not deviating from that. It's definitely a Chardonnay. I'm just trying to warm it up in the glass a little bit. Wow, that's really different.
Totally different from palate to nose.
Yeah, really different. I'm getting a much warmer fruit profile than I was expecting. It's got tropical, richer peach, like yellow peach, as opposed to that white nectarines or those more citrus tones. I'm definitely getting that.
I'm not going to lie, I'm not getting any of that.
I love Amber's face going, yes, I'm getting white wine.
It's very oaked on the palate for me. I'm getting a lot of that smokiness. It's actually not as cold as I thought it was.
Oh, because you're getting all those tasting notes. Yeah.
Any indications on region? Too early yet? We can revisit again.
I don't think it's Victorian. Our producer's smirking a little bit over there.
Georgie gives it all away.
I'm wondering if I'm being led down the garden path here, but anyway. All right, well, we'll come back to that one. I'm still going with oak Chardonnay though. What we're talking about when we say social media. Today we're actually referring specifically to organic posts on the social media platforms that are available to wineries, of which there are many. I'm sure all of you will be very familiar with Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, also other platforms like Pinterest, Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now known as X. There are a few platforms that are available, and they all have got quite different strengths and weaknesses in terms of whether or not a winery should be using them or not. And a lot of that will be down to the available budget of the winery, the brand and the audience that the winery is trying to reach, and the type of content that they're wanting to create. It's also really important to understand that each platform will prioritise slightly different content in slightly different formats and dimensions. And so gone are the days where you can develop content and then automatically blast it across all of your social media channels. I think having a more tailored approach per platform, making sure that it is formatted first and foremost for the platform that you're actually wanting to use it on, as opposed to just formatting content in general and then posting it across all platforms without changes. I think it's important to understand the platform nuance and making sure that you are delivering the right content to the right audiences through the right platform.
What would you say to a winery who's starting out on social media and they're looking at all these different platforms that you've just mentioned that are available?
The first thing that they should do is have a really good look at who their actual audience is. So who's buying their product, who's interacting with them at cellar door, if they've got any demographic data, and then they can start to have a look at what platforms, demographics and reach might be suitable for them. For example, we know that Facebook tends to have a slightly older audience. Often we see a lot of wineries are very successful in that space because there's a lot of Gen X and or baby boomers in the Facebook space in particular. And we know that a lot of those traditionally are wine drinkers. That being said, if there is a hospitality component to your business, some sort of food offering, or if you've got a cellar door that's open to the public for tastings and things, Instagram is really important, the millennial and slightly younger crowd in particular. And it's also a great way to future-proof the business because you're looking at who's coming through the next generation and getting them to engage. They may not necessarily be the biggest purchasers of your wines in terms of dollar for dollar revenue, but it's certainly worth investing because they're the ones that will book and come and have an experience there. And it's really important to build that connection through that generation. I've always had a lot of wineries asking me about TikTok. TikTok is obviously massive. Originally started off very, very young demographic. It's definitely changing and moving to being a more broad, more general demographic. But that being said, it's still weighted towards a much younger generation. The type of content that does really well on TikTok is hard for wineries to do well.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the trending and fun stuff that happens on TikTok may not necessarily suit the winery brand. And so you have to make a decision as a business as to whether or not TikTok is the right move for you guys. The best thing to do is to actively look at what trends works on TikTok and have a really good understanding of what you would need to do as a brand to be successful in that space, because it's very different from Instagram. It's very different from Facebook and the type of content that you're probably used to putting together.
If you even look at any of the brands that are doing it pretty successfully, you'll notice that they're posting, it could be 3 times a day. It's a huge undertaking, and you need someone doing it as almost like a full-time role, because a lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and hoping that it sticks. That's really what TikTok is at the minute. It's jumping on trends pretty quickly and just trying different stuff. So if you are going to go down that road, it's a big investment in order to do it well.
It's absolutely possible to be very successful on TikTok, but I think the reality of what it takes to be successful on TikTok wineries and maybe not understanding how much investment that is. And now whether or not that is going to equate to long-term customers in that younger demographic, how many sales that's going to translate to, a lot of that is still quite unknown because the platform's popularity is still obviously rising, and winery content is really only starting in the last little while now that they've changed a lot of the rules around alcohol content being able to be served on TikTok. You can now advertise on TikTok with alcohol content, which is also relatively new. So there's still a lot of grey area in terms of what impact that's going to have on a brand long term in terms of sales and revenue. So I think before you go down that path, have a really strong think about whether or not you're prepared to commit the resources.
And in the interim, while you are figuring that out, focus really on Instagram, Facebook, and get that really solid. Understand your content. Work out what you're doing there. Service these other channels first.
One of the things I think is really important for wineries to do is to actually look outside of the wine industry for inspiration. There are a lot of wineries on social media, and I don't always see great examples of what really good social media posting looks like in the wine industry. I think that there's a huge amount of inspiration to be taken outside of the wine industry. There's a reason why influencers are good at their jobs, why they're influencers, because they create great content and they have a lot of meaningful engagement with people. There's nothing wrong with having a look at those ideas and finding a way to make that applicable to your brand.
Yeah.
If it's all about engagement, then what are the things that you're engaging with and why are you engaging with them? And have a think about that. What are the things that other brands are doing that you can see that has got, really high levels of engagement, and how can that apply to your brand?
And a key factor is quality over quantity, and within that is authenticity as well. So it's making sure that you're producing content that makes sense to you as a brand. I always love and find it interesting that the end product is a bottle of wine, but the way in which that wine has been made within the winery and then from the vineyard can be so different. There's lots of different ways that you as a winery can look at your unique content that can make sure that it's quality over just posting every day something different.
One of the things that's important, especially for Instagram, is that often social media platforms are becoming almost an extension of your website. So where someone may not necessarily be following you, they will often look up your social media profiles and check you out, which means they'll scroll through the grids, they'll have a look at previous posts to get a sense of what your brand is about. So it's really important, I think, in terms of quality posting, that you are laying out your grids in a really consistent manner that tells a very visual brand story, so that if someone is coming to your social media, that you're giving them a bit of a brand experience. One of the important things to understand about the grid is when to make sure that your post is going on the grid, and then when you should use it for stories and keep it off the grid. You can have beautiful, very curated, gorgeous looking imagery and or videos to flesh out a grid so that it's creating this beautiful brand experience. A lot of them will want to engage with slightly rawer, more real content, which is fantastic on stories in particular, and it keeps it off the grid. An iPhone, or an Android phone is fantastic for just capturing on the fly stuff around the winery and or in the cellar door, in the restaurant, that's going to be quite engaging for the viewers, but it will not then mess up the grid so that you're keeping that brand aesthetic really strong.
I think curating the grid also comes back to what we said earlier about forward planning with your content pillars. You can lay out your plan and then you can see how the grid's going to look so that it's not going to be inconsistent or a lot of different things going on. Looking ahead and planning out your content so that you can have a more curated, beautiful Instagram feed.
So in terms of quality over quantity as well, let's talk about some really quick wins in terms of following these few steps will make sure that you're going to have the best foot forward for capturing the attention of the algorithm as much as possible. Video is super important to prioritize. Instagram in particular in the last couple of years is now having to compete directly with TikTok. Video has never been prioritised more on Instagram than it is right now, as they are really trying to keep that engagement on their own platform. So make sure that you are creating real content. It doesn't have to be long. In fact, the shorter the better. It needs to be short, sharp, punchy, looking in that 10 to 15 second mark that will capture somebody's attention. Make sure that you're choosing the right cover image, or you don't just have to have the reel posted. You can make sure that you're adding a cover image that actually fits in nicely with the grid aesthetic. And then always use your trending music. So when you're scrolling through Instagram and or Facebook, you'll often see the little arrow at the bottom that shows you that a particular piece of music is trending. When you're making reels, make sure that you're using trending music, because it's basically like hitching your wagon straight to the algorithm, because it's going to be prioritizing content that's using that trend at that particular time. You don't just have to use music for reels, you can use it for carousels as well.
Yeah, because we've found that outside of reels, Instagram is prioritizing anything with that sort of carousel, even more so over static. Looking at any way that you can latch onto something that Instagram is going to prioritize over other formats.
Making sure that although you can scroll through what's trending and then what makes sense for you. So don't just choose what's trending that's totally not your brand, but figuring out, okay, what's trending And what is you?
There's often a lot of trending music to choose from. So you just pick something that suits what the post is about, suits what works with your brand in that particular moment as well. The other thing I suppose to consider as well is hashtags and where their place is in 2025, because it's quite different these days comparatively to where it was in the past. Everybody wants to get on the home screen. That is where you are going to potentially able to reach new followers or new people that haven't engaged with your brand before, which is the whole point, is to try and expand your reach. The only way that you're going to get picked to go on to those home platforms or home screens is if your content is super engaging and super rich. The other thing that is really important is that where hashtags used to be a massive trend, Instagram in particular has actually changed the way that they do their keyword searching now. Where it used to be done exclusively on hashtags, it's now actually done also on the actual copy that's inside the caption that you write for your post. It also uses AI to actually scan for the voice that's in a video and use the words in the video in particular, and also using that for keywords.
And I think a lot of people aren't aware of that yet.
It is changing. And so there's less onus on having to stuff your posts full of all the relevant hashtags. As long as you've got enough of those words in your key post, like in your actual key caption, it becomes less important to use the hashtags. That being said, if there are regional hashtags in particular that is really hard to work into it naturally into a caption, then, then make sure that you're still hitting the mark with any captions that are super relevant.
Your Celador.
Yes, 100%. If there's any regional bodies in the area, tourism bodies that you want to try and boost the reach there. But in terms of, do you need to have 30 hashtags on your post? Well, the answer is no, not anymore.
The SEO hacks of 10, 20 years ago of trying to stuff your website with keywords to try and be found, that's no longer the same with the hashtags anymore. It's about more relevant content that's going to be more purposeful. And then those few ones that you can't fit in there become your hashtags.
The other thing to understand as well, especially around the home screens and the explore section, is that it's very dominated by trends. And that's another part, I suppose, of making sure that you're doing social media well, is being understanding of what trends are happening and how you can utilize those, and whether or not it's appropriate to utilize that for your brand or wait for the next one. That's where I think it's important for wineries to make sure they're looking outside of their own industry for what is trending for their audiences, and making sure that your posts are delivering something that is going to be engaging.
Yeah, even if they spend 5 minutes on scrolling through Reels, you'll identify pretty quickly what actually is working, what Instagram actually is pushing out to you. That's a good indication of what trends are happening at the minute and what you can actually jump on.
Then not all of them will be appropriate and fit in with the brand values that you might have, but it's still really important to be aware of what's actually out there in the space. You need to be measuring what you're doing. There's so many reporting tools inside of each of the platforms that will give you an indication about what type of content works and what people maybe aren't engaging with as much. And especially if you make a plan, let's say for 3 months, and you see that plan through, you'll often see trends. It's a bit hard if you're just looking at it from a post by post perspective. But if you actually take a step back and look at it from a bird's eye view, what were people engaging with the most here? And then that can help inform the decisions that you make going forward as well.
A perfect example of looking outside of the wine industry in terms of brands doing social pretty well, organic social, is one of our clients, our spirit clients, Rusty Barrel. Recently, we ran a full campaign where we ran an artist competition. So it was basically asking artists to design a specific piece of art that would go onto the vodka bottle. And the reason that we did this was we identified a genre or interests that the Rusty Barrel customer were into, not just spirits. These are real people. They've got real passions and interests.
Yeah, multiple interests.
Yeah, so we knew that the Rusty Barrel customer were really into grunge or art.
There's a lot of subculture in there around skating and around
graffiti,
tattooing.
Yeah.
But it also aligned really well with the Rusty Barrel brand itself, because Chris and the team there are really dynamic. They love to support up and coming ideas. They're really passionate about what they do. They're a grassroots Australian business, and they wanted to create create a community around their brand. And they've been really successful in this. And one of the things that we did was run this artist competition. And when we're talking about planning a grid, it's important to understand that you don't just have to have, like, I'm going to do this post and this post and this post. You can create a campaign that's a series of posts that's maybe specific to organic social media that may run over a few months, that's designed to generate longer term engagement. And that's what we did for Rusty Barrel. It was really, really exciting to see it all come together. We started with the teaser post and the launch, and essentially we ran a competition whereby artists from all around Australia, whatever subgenre of art they were into, could submit their artwork for consideration for a limited release bottle. There was also a cash prize that Rusty Barrel team put up for grabs as well. And what happened is it sparked this beautiful engagement and this wonderful community where everybody was submitting their artwork. Then Rusty Barrel every week would go through and put up some of the entrants so that everybody could get a sense of what was being included and who some of the contenders were for winning the competition. All the artists started to talk to each other in the threads. Everybody was wishing each other luck. There was a lot of tagging going on, a lot of people
sharing it.
Yeah, and so this small little competition suddenly started to get massive traction. It ran for about 3 months, and by the end of it, the average level of engagement on the post was more than 20 times what we were actually getting prior to this competition.
And the funny thing is, it had nothing to do with talking about the vodka specifically or trying to sell the vodka, which is just interesting. So it doesn't always have to be about trying to push a product.
Yeah, exactly. But then, interestingly enough, that's exactly what happened. And we did sell a lot of vodka, but we sold it organically without having that call to action.
Sell.
Exactly, because it became very natural for people to be interested in the product that they suddenly were very emotionally invested in.
Because they followed the whole journey of the campaign.
And so when we launched the limited release bottle, we were selling out of it pretty quickly because we generated quite a lot of interest around the journey. I encourage you all to go and have a look at their socials. Rusty Barrel Spirits on Instagram in particular. Michaela Walker was the winner of the competition. Shout out to Michaela. She did a fabulous job. And I think it's just a really interesting journey that we went on with this client through organic social media. And it was fantastic to see what type of engagement is actually possible.
And we'll probably take that sort of similar idea. We won't run the same campaign again necessarily, but is there another sub-genre of people that we can tap into and do a similar campaign again?
Your customers will be into wine, but they'll also be into a lot of other things as well. And there's potentially a lot of opportunity there to spark conversation and engagement that's related to wine, but not necessarily directly always talking about wine. So there's lots of different areas that you can tap into in terms of tourism, travel, fine dining, and food, and other different types of agriculture and farming and produce that are sort of sub-related.
One of the reasons why the artist competition also worked pretty well is that Chris, our client, was also very open to giving it a go. We weren't sure if it was going to work at all at the beginning of running the campaign, but Chris was extremely open to trying it. And I think that can be applied to any winery as well. It's just giving things a go. They're not going to always work out. Sometimes it will fall flat, but it's about just being open to new ideas.
If you've got a strong plan in place as well, it really just helps. It doesn't have to be a one-off idea. It can be an idea that lasts for months that you continue to talk about and continue to evolve. You end up with better engagement long term if you're having conversations like that over a longer period of time.
Yeah, fully fleshed out. idea.
Don't ever forget, though, that your social media followers often create great content on your behalf, and that it's a fantastic idea to repurpose that. Always crediting who that post came from in the first place. But it's great because it actually feels more like a community. It feels more like you're talking back to the people that are talking to you, and that you're having those ongoing conversations. So I think repurposing user-generated content is a really great way for wineries to supplement their own content and sort of show how the conversations are continuing.
If you're someone who's posting or tagging a brand and they repurpose that content or engage with you, I mean, I know myself, even just as a user, I find that they've really listened to me, and it fosters that brand appreciation as well. So I think that's really important as part of that community aspect. So not only do you get that repurposed content, but you're continuing to engage with your own brand followers or potential customers as well.
It's really important that if someone is commenting on your post, make sure you reply to that comment.
Or asking a question. Seeing a question unanswered is just awkward. You know?
Exactly.
It's really just like, give them the response that they want and engage with them.
So there's two reasons why this becomes really helpful. The first one is that it's obvious that you're having conversations with your people, and so that's engagement. And the second reason is because platforms prioritize engagement.
Yes.
So the more comments that you have, the more likes, the more shares that you have on a post, the more the algorithm is going to prioritize you. So if you're going in and replying to somebody's content, someone's comment, you're actually doubling that down. If all the staff go in and reshare your post, you've got 7 or 8 reshares, and the algorithm's going to see that as engagement and help to prioritize the post. So there's small things like that can make organic social media just go that little bit further.
Even if you think the comment isn't even worth a reply, if it's not even a question, it's just someone commenting something, still reply to it, because it comes back to that whole trying to drive up the engagement.
Yeah. The other thing as well to consider is to make sure that you're moderating your own comments and other people's comments as well, because sometimes there might be a comment that comes onto the feed that's inappropriate, or it might be that it doesn't reflect well on the brand. It's really, really important to make sure that you are taking the opportunity to address that person directly, whether or not that be some sort of critical feedback of an experience or a wine that they've had. You want to make sure that you are very carefully looking after those conversations. So it's important to hide that comment. However, you also need to directly message the person whose comment that was, because if you hide the comment without addressing them directly, it potentially may spur on someone to actually continue to comment in the feed with things that are quite negative. So I would really encourage that if there's any kind of negative feedback on any of the posts or comments, you make sure that you moderate that well.
That you either hide it or you reply to them and say, hey, we've reached out to you privately, so that if someone does land on the post and they see a bit of a negative comment, they're like, okay, well, at least they're addressing it with the person.
Yeah, 100%. The exception to that is actually one of our clients, Patrick at Coonawarra. Shout out to Luke and Lynn and Leilani and the wonderful team over there. We did a really crazy campaign with them last year, which was so fun and generated so much interesting commentary. They have this edible insect and wine pairing. The idea was that they had just launched this beautiful biodiverse garden at Celador, and they've also got a lot of different insectariums and gardens throughout their vineyard as part of their integrated pest management system. And they're really encouraging people to walk through the gardens and understand how the insects are impacting the diverse ecosystem of the vineyard and how that impacts the wine. And one of the things that they've done is taken it a step further and actually have an edible insect and Cabernet pairing at their cellar door. And it's wild. We posted about it and we had a whole sort of series of content, and there was a lot of people who were pretty unsure about that tasting, whether or not that was going to be a good idea or not. But we loved that because it was sparking engagement and conversation. And so while technically you might look at that as maybe some of them were negative comments, it actually was the point, was to open people's eyes up to something really quirky and really different that was a conversation started that was a little bit controversial. And that particular content ended up being picked up by the ABC over in South Australia. It ended up having some political interest because it was quite topical around the sustainable story that they were telling. And it ended up becoming quite a big thing. So whether or not you were into the tasting or not into the tasting, it didn't really matter because everyone was talking about it. And I think that was another example of some really great content where you're thinking outside of the box. And it doesn't always have to be super positive sunshine and roses, that it can actually be a little bit topical and
divisive.
Yeah, and divisive, as long as it's handled in a really respectful way and in a way that makes sense for the brand. I must say, though, I just don't know if I was game enough to try the insects and the wine pairing.
Yeah,
myself.
no, I don't think it would have been my thing.
No.
But I tell you, there were actually a lot of people who did try it. It almost became like an extreme sport type wine tasting, where you go into the cellar door and work yourself up for the tasting.
I was going to say, well, to be fair, with a glass of wine in hand, I probably could have been pushed there. So, that certainly helps.
But also, what a great way to bring such an important topic and such an important...
I love that. I love the layers.
Yeah, it's not just talking about, hey, we're sustainable. It's actually going a step further and encouraging people to really interact with what that might mean.
And now we've talked a lot about organic social media, well, all about organic social media today. That next layer is obviously paid social.
One of the first things to do would be just to explain the difference between organic social media and paid social media. Paid social media specifically refers to any form of advertising that you are doing through the platforms. It's a really great way of expanding your reach by paying to play per se. It's very different from the traditional boosted post, which has got quite a limited range of options. A lot of wineries will often boost an event post or something like that in particular. And it's really great at having an impact for a smaller audience. I think the next level would be actually looking at how to do paid media marketing really well to supplement your organic social media strategy, and how you can then look at growing your sales, how you can look at driving people to make bookings at your cellar door or your restaurant, how you can essentially drive people to interact with your business using a call to action. One of the things I would very much recommend is on your organic social media feed, try and keep a lot of the heavy sales focused or call to action outside of the organic social media feed. You want to keep that space very connected and community orientated. The more that you're asking someone to do something for you, the less engaged they're going to become. It's really important to remember that your organic social media space needs to be about conversation between the customer and yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't ask them to do something like buy in a sale or book an event, but it definitely needs to be really limited. It can't be something that you're doing consistently in that space, because then they feel like they're being advertised to all the time. The great thing about paid media is that ads that come through social media feeds are very normal and very natural, and people are very used to seeing them. And they're often quite subtle, especially the ones on Instagram and things in particular. A lot of the time, if they're done well, sometimes you don't even realise it's actually a sponsored
That you're being served
post.
an ad.
Yeah, you're being served an ad.
Just really amplifying your best content to the right audience.
It's also a really great way of springboarding into new audiences. You can do organically, but takes a really long time. And supplementing your organic strategy with a really strong paid media strategy is a way to fast forward that.
Now, when used together, you've got your organic being authentic and relatable and engaging to your community, and then paid helps accelerate that growth and reach much faster than you would be able to achieve just on organic alone.
Should we taste the wine again?
Yes, let's have a look, see where it's up to. Let's chat also around some quick wins for wineries. What are some of your ideas for quick wins that wineries can achieve?
You want to make sure that your bio is up to date. It needs to mention who you are, what you do. And then I think having a link in bio, this is where you can host a lot of your different links, bookings to your cellar door. If you have a specific pack offer that you want to link to, where all the links are hosted into one specific platform, that's also an easy one.
Linktree in particular, well, it doesn't have to be Linktree, there's lots of different services. I think is really important for Instagram, because it gives, as we're saying, like a lot of people are almost using the Instagram feed or the Instagram profile like a website, and you can only have one link in the bio. And so having that Linktree or group of links gives you that mini website experience. And I think it's really important to make sure that's curated nicely.
Another one then is your posting schedule, making sure that you're staying consistent with it, and forward planning, showing up consistently online is the best way forward. I think one of the most important things is making sure that you are being authentic to your brand, making sure that you're not just jumping on any sort of trend, portraying your brand in the best light.
Much more fruit coming through on this now. And now the sort of smokiness is blown off a little bit. It's not super pale either, indicating it's definitely had some barrel work.
I'm not getting much when I'm tasting it.
I think it's a 2023, although it is more golden. No, I'm going to go with 2023. I don't think it's Victorian. It's definitely in that warmer, peachy, tropical kind of spectrum, and it does have quite a bit of oak on it. A lot of the New South Wales Chardonnay regions in particular, like Tumbarumba's quite cold.
Yeah, it was at the Orange region as well, was cold as well.
Yeah, it is quite cool there. It could be the Orange region. I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
Is it actually the Orange region?
Our producer's wiggling her eyebrows. I feel like we've been led to water here.
Yeah,
She's leading the horse to water. We're going New South Wales 2023, region to be determined, but potentially somewhere centrally located. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay.
So it could be...
love it.
Could be hilltops, could be Tumbarumba, could be Orange, could be anywhere, I think, around that central New South Wales region. We had a lot of, I think we've had a lot of help here today, I'll be honest. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, orange.
So this is the Block 7 Chardonnay from Briar Ridge. And it's orange.
There we go.
Briar Ridge, of course, being a very well-known Hunter Valley producer, but this is actually from their orange vineyard. Beautiful. Shout out to Duff and Pat and the team at Briar Ridge. All right. Well, now that we've had the big Chardonnay reveal, let's have a recap of what we've chatted about today. Wineries need to really understand what's involved in organic social media in order to do it really well. I think it's important to show up often and to show up with quality as opposed to quantity. So that's one thing. There's a lot of really quick wins that wineries can do now to impact how their algorithm prioritizes their posts, making sure that they're using video content, making sure that they're using trending music where possible and or where appropriate, being aware of how the actual copy that they're using in their posts or in their video captions impacts their searchability, their discoverability. So all of those things are really quick wins that can be done. One of the biggest takeaways we're hoping people understand from today is make a plan. Make a plan to succeed. Make sure that you're putting together content well in advance so that you have got an idea about the things that you're wanting to capture and make that content as engaging as possible.
You can also download our winery social media playbook in the show notes, which will step out how to achieve all of this.
And if you ever need any help with your winery's digital strategy, we work with wineries all day, every day. So please reach out to us at any time for a free, no obligation consult. We'd love to hear from you.
Don't be putting any of this in while we're on 7th.
It's a huge investment.
It is.
Any of the brands.
That's going on the blooper reel for sure.